Like, do your shit perfectly. Like right now, I'm doing this podcast perfectly. I'm not worried about anything. This is my time to be the best. And then, like, when I have a break later today, I'm not going to guilt myself into feeling like I need to do more. I'm going to go do other things that really matter to me that have to do with myself or in my relationships, right? Because there's those two other areas of my life. And so, instead of me having to go and do more or read another book or anything, I'm going to have an hour lunch break with my wife.
Welcome back to another episode of Lionheart Radio. Your host, Rick Alexander. Today I'm talking with what feels like a longtime friend, although I guess it's only been like a year or two now, Angelo Sisco of the Alpha Hippie podcast. Thanks for joining me, buddy.
Oh, my pleasure, man. I love being on your show.
I think this is the third time, so third time's the charm. Every single one of these, I'm not even kidding, like we get a ton of people that reach out with some insight that they were like, or I'll be talking to a client and then they're like, oh, I heard on this podcast. It's always yours. So you always got some good shit to say.
Well, thank you.
The reason I wanted to have you on the show is we talked, I went through your Masculine Mastery course, which actually you're not enrolling right now, right? Just for people listening.
Yeah, so we're finalizing the dates right now. I'm looking to start one up the second week of May, and I'll be putting out more about that as we lock down the dates.
Perfect. Well, in the course, one of the things that I notice, I have pages and pages of notes from you talking, is that you go through a lot of things that in the personal development space we all talk about quite a bit. Things like breathing, things like values, things like self-awareness. And so what I wanted to do is I wrote down some key ones that I hear mentioned by a lot of quote-unquote influencers or thought leaders. And what I thought we'd do is we could just like kind of pick apart the role that you think they play in your lives, because what I noticed is as you talked about them, they had more authority in my mind than when other people talk about them. Like you just broke it down in a way that was more understandable or made more sense. So that's what I want to do today. And the first thing I want to kick off with is talking about the role that passion plays in somebody's lives. And the reason I want to is there's like a bifurcation, I think, in the movement right now with thought leaders. Like one is stop telling people to go after their passion because they need to have a paycheck and they're going to be miserable as it doesn't work out. And then the other one, which is a camp that I find myself into, and I think because I've gone down both roads is where I find myself in this camp, which is you have to cultivate passion in your own life, and it is almost the key to all of the other things in life that you might want. And so let's kick it off with the role of passion that plays in your life.
Yeah. Oh, this is a great topic. So what I believe passion is, first, I just want to define this because I think that's what like really gets really twisted for people, is to me is passion is an obsessive high energy love. It's the best way I think about it. Like when I think about what I'm passionate about, it's like this obsessive, very high energy type of love. It's a different kind of love. And I wish like a lot of the English language, one of the challenges is, how like the Greeks, they have different kinds of love. I think like, how there's eros and agape, like I wish we were able to really distinguish that. And I think that's what passion is. It's this high energy, obsessive love that you have for anything. You could have for your telephone, you could have for your shoe, or you could have for a person. And that's the first thing. Also, too, for me, I am a highly emotional person. I live my life by my feelings, and I know that could get me in trouble sometimes. But just so everyone is listening, I am more geared towards how I feel about something than anything else. I'm not really the engineer that's going to build something out on a spreadsheet. I'm going to feel my way through it. And so just for anyone that's like that, I just want you to know, one, I don't think it's bad to be this way. A lot of people may have told me that I was too sensitive when I was younger. But in reality, I think that's what allows me to be the best teacher I could be, is because I have such a high level of sensitivity. So if you're like this, just know that there is places for you to go, and it's not a dead end. Okay. So to me, I don't know. Have you ever watched the show Narcos?
A little bit, yeah. I didn't really get into it, but I watched like a bunch of it, yeah.
Okay, so I can't help it. I watch all these things obsessively. And so there's Narcos Mexico. And basically, this is about the marijuana explosion of Mexico into America in the 80s. And there's three guys that are basically the part of the cartel, the main guys. There's one guy that's like Juan Miguel Iardo, who's like the mastermind, and he's a little conniving, and he's sort of that guy. Then there's this other guy, Don Nestor, who's like this old man that's like a farmer that's been a part of the game a while. And then there's this guy, Rafa. Now, what Rafa did was Rafa figured out how to grow the best marijuana there was, and he figured out how to do it in the desert in Mexico. So he is this extremely passionate, crazy marijuana grower, and he calls them his plantitas, and he loves this marijuana plants. Okay. When Juan Miguel wants to go into the cocaine business, Rafa, even though he would make more money, hates it because it doesn't have anything to do with his plants. And he goes crazy about it, and he's crazy about his wife, his girl in the show. But I just and I looked at my wife when we were watching that, and I said, that's who I identify with. Not the unruly kingpin that wants all the money and the greed and the power. Is that I love that he's in love with his craft. And for me, that's just like the ultimate display of passion, is that you fall in love with your craft, and that's what the focus of your life is. Like, that kind of result is just doing your craft is the goal. And I think that that's where a lot of people, get the advice that, you have to be safe and you need to be secure. And I do realize that some people vary in what they feel is unstable and risk taking. But to me, to live, not trying to live in your passion and what you really love and enjoy is prison. It's like being in prison. It's a slow death.
And so I think that's the thing for me, right? That you're talking about this guy who has this opportunity to move to cocaine and stands to make way more money, right? And if there's no emotion connected to the thing, it's not that you couldn't do it, but you wouldn't do it with the degree of excellence that you would should you have emotion connecting you and curiosity connecting you to that thing that you're doing now, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a perfect way to put it. Like, what I imagine is that when you're done doing anything, that feeling of satisfaction, I think we could all relate to it on some level. If you close your eyes and felt satisfied, it's just this nice, glowing, warm feeling. And that's from doing work that you're passionate about.
So, all right. So this is good then. There's another thing that you said. There's a quote you said in the course about passion that it resonated and I felt it deep. Depending on the date or the day, hate and passion are the same thing. Oh. So, but we're talking right now about things that we love, things that like pull you in, draw you in emotionally. So how do we reconcile this?
Oh, okay. I don't think they're different. And I think what people think about doing is, I'm pursuing my passion, so that means every day is great and I'm super happy. That doesn't mean that. That just means you are chasing something after that you love. I'm a Chicago Bulls fan. I still wear Jordans, and so on Michael Jordan's 50th birthday, he did an interview, and he said, what do you love the most about the game of basketball? And he said, it's the love that I have for it. That is the reason why I love so much, because that kind of love could make you do anything. And there's moments when it sucks, and there's moments when you have to do things that you don't want to do, but it's all about staying connected to that love. Then that's why you do it. I mean, there's moments when I want to burn my gym down, and there's moments when I want to scream and cry how much I love it. I mean, and it could all be in the same day, but that doesn't mean that I have to be happy all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's great. So one of the other things you said is that you like feel your way through something, and so this is. All right, so if you are that engineer mind, or if you're a little more analytical or something, then it's like when I'm telling someone to, like, that's why I think follow your passion is such terrible advice, because it's like it's not actionable really, right? And so my question for you is how do you begin finding that finite point to start moving towards something that you're passionate about? And I'm asking more for the listener, but
Yeah. So how do you find out? Like, what's the starting point?
Yeah, because like I think a lot of people they hear stuff like about cultivating passion and about figuring out what it is that drives them, and I think that they're the question I hear a lot is, okay, yeah, but like how do I figure out what I'm passionate about?
Yeah. Great question. Okay. First, the answer will never come by you thinking about it. So that just means that you have to do things. And as funny as this sounds, and as contrary to probably what most people are thinking, is I think you got to just go do stuff that you enjoy and that you would call playing. So I trained people outside for 2 months without taking money because I just thought it was fun.
Like basketball?
No, like fitness, like
Oh,
my
oh,
whole
train
CrossFit
people.
life.
Yeah, okay.
Like I trained people outside for free, and I just wanted to do it because it was play for me. It gave me energy. It made me feel good. And then I fast forward to 2 months and I go, can this be a career? Am I? And that was how it works. I think what people try to do is they try to do it the other way because the other way would make you feel more safe. The other way would give you more certainty.
Hmm.
But this way is you have to get out there and what would you want to do? What are you curious about? What would you enjoy? It's not always like and people I think sometimes think about things very financial and transactional. Don't worry about how you're going to make money doing it. Just worry about how you're really great. And like I grew up, the best janitor made the most money. The best hooker made the most money. The best CEO makes the most money. Just go find something that you think is play and become the best at it, and the rest of it will kind of show itself.
Yeah, I like this idea that you mentioned. Like you can't think about it, like you can't think your way out of it. And I think one of the inherent problems with the personal development space is that you do start because you become so self-analyzing that you're always like you end up sort of in loops of metacognition where you're always looking at yourself, you're always analyzing your thoughts. And one of the things that I began to realize is that like that doesn't end. There's no like that's why you can't think your way out of it, because you end up in like cycles, you end up in loops of thought, and none of them are actually going to yield this point of clarity. Whereas once you just go out and engage with reality, it's like that's where you're going to find the clarity. And there's something inherent about the human being where when we look back on ourselves too much, we become too entrenched in the minutia or something like that, where we end up in these cyclic thoughts. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think reality gives you feedback. Your thoughts run you in circles.
Yeah, okay. That's a way easier way to say it. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and so I think that happens a lot. And I think the other thing that you mentioned was this idea of love and the way that we only have like one, like I love you, my sneakers, and my spouse all with the exact same word, right? And so, I actually did a show about that last week, so it's interesting that you say it, but I've been thinking a lot lately about how our culture and our language actually is almost tyrannical in the fact that it doesn't allow us to fully express how we feel about certain things. And so it almost keeps us in lanes, it seems like.
I 100% agree with that. And I think we kind of touched on that towards the end of the book too, as a little bit, I mean, end of the course is the amount of feelings that we believe that people really think they have or they know of is so small compared to what the emotional and feelings are available.
Mm.
We're just, people just get really stuck with that stuff. And like we talked about earlier, people say they're angry, but they're really scared. You know what I mean? Like there's such a misunderstanding of all that stuff. And that to me is probably one of the biggest things when I have a conversation with someone, when they could really articulate their feelings better than good, fine, and whatever, stressed. I think that's probably the litmus test for self-awareness, is just listen to how someone describes their emotional state and feelings. Because very rarely are you just good.
Yeah, it's a good point.
It's just like, fuck.
Yeah. So that's interesting because it's like you have you're constantly rifling through the full spectrum of human emotions, and yet, yeah, you're right. We only use like probably 3 to 5 words on a daily basis to describe how we feel. Wild.
Yep.
And so this kind of like leads me into the next one that I had, which might be a little bit of a loaded question, but fear. So, like the role that fear plays in our lives, I think that there's obviously fear is something that everybody struggles with. They struggle with on levels they see, which is like I'm afraid of heights, I'm afraid of I have claustrophobia, whatever that is. But then there's also these like sort of subconscious fears that are insecurities and that are anger and they manifest in different ways. And I think right pre-show, you and I talked a little bit about the way that fear shows up in everybody's lives. So I think that'd be a good place to kick it off.
Yeah. So a lot of some of these newer things that I've learned, I want to really give credit to Kenny Weiss. He's introduced me to some amazing topics. So Kenny Weiss, thank you for this. And fear gets broken down into three main areas. The first one is rejection. The second one is inadequacy, and the third one is powerlessness. Okay. So the first one is rejection, which basically means like our need to belong. Okay. Truth be told, at the end of the day, if you feel rejected by anyone, that has more to do with you than them. You're just keeping yourself in that victim mindset. You might need to rework that before you could really make peace with it. The next one is inadequacy. That's not being good enough in something. And so if you feel inadequate at something, the one thing that we have going for us is that we live in the most amazing time ever to be a human being. And I'm willing to bet that you could YouTube it and figure out what you want to know.
So from a technical standpoint, 100%.
Yeah, from a technical standpoint, and even like you could really figure a lot of things out. And then from powerlessness, that has to do with control, not feeling control or not being in control or someone controlling you. And that's what fear really is. But just to take a step back with fear is, I think it's all how you even when you say the word fear, what comes up for you? And if your knee-jerk reaction to fear is this is bad and get this away from me, I mean, like, don't get me wrong. As a human, you will probably feel that first. But as soon as that first signal goes off, what happens next really determines how well you can make friends with your fear and how well you're going to have a chance to overcome it, or how you're going to keep denying it or running away from it or shaming yourself for it. And that's where I think people just really misunderstand it is we look at fear like it's this damnation and bad thing, when in reality, you probably should look at fear as just an awesome signal to wake up to something you're not paying attention to.
The problem, I think, is that fear is such a gripping emotion. Like if you have fear, there's almost no room in your emotional bandwidth for something else. And so it's like, when I hear you say, like, okay, you got to wake up, it's like an informational input. It's going to wake you up to something. True, but if you're gripped by fear, it's hard to look around with any kind of perspective. Do you think that? That's what it seems like in my life anyway. Like it's hard to think of anything other than the fear that you're feeling when you are in moments of fear. And so I think that's how you get these coping mechanisms, or you just spin up whatever gets you out of it. It's hard to sit with fear and to really like think about what it might be trying to teach you.
Yeah, that, like you just said, it's hard to sit with this, right? Because for so many of us, we don't articulate it well. We're embarrassed. We deny it. We have shame. For me to tell you that I'm scared about being this means I'm lacking or I'm not enough, right? Like we live in such a culture where being open to admit this stuff, I think, just makes it much harder for us to do it. And I think, teachers like you and me are trying to help people just become not so scared of saying these words.
Yeah, I would say that. I'd say like most of personal development comes down to you're just teaching people how to not be so scared in their own lives so that they can actually do the things that they want to do.
Yep.
And whether you cut that from a point of looking at emotions or you cut that from a point of physiology, like in personal development, that is essentially what you're trying to do, is coach people through the innate fears that they have around basic human needs like affection or belonging or whatever.
Absolutely. That's a great way to sum it up.
So this is great then. One of the things that you said, and this is going to like kind of transition us into the next topic, which is if you weren't angry, you'd have no need to be scared. And so I wanted to really start talking about, well, let's start with let's elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. Anger stems from fear. You're scared of something.
And so you're saying anger is the way you cope with that thing.
Anger is the way that I cope with it, me personally, and I think it's the way a lot of people cope with it. I think that's the way I could say I'm mad at Rick Alexander, but if Rick Alexander hurt me, I'm a pussy.
Mm.
So it's literally just become more accepted to say I'm angry than I'm scared.
Yes, 100%. One of the things that I noticed about being in the military, and it's a little bit off topic, but is that in most settings, anger is actually the only emotion that you're allowed to show. And I
Mm-hmm.
think any kind of like hyper aggressive culture is probably that exact same way, which is like, so I got really good at being like that guy that can just be like super pissed about something to get what I need out of that situation. Because so regardless of what you actually feel, it's like just overcome that feeling with anger and you'll get somewhere in a lot of different cultures and a lot of different societies. And so, but the thing about it is after 10 years, I realized like, okay, well, it's literally like anchoring my soul. There's like, when anger's part of you, you actually, like, fear's one thing. When anger's part of you, you actually can't feel other things. Like, you can't be empathetic. You can't be, you get no lesson out of a situation when you are actually angry. And so I think I'm saying that to say to you, like, where do you think people, let's say this, do you think that there's a proper role of anger in someone's life?
Ooh, great question. Um, I think under extreme situations, it is a very valuable tool. I think what most people do, though, is they need a screwdriver and they bring a hammer because that's what they know or that's what's worked in the past on certain situations. So I think there is a place for anger in our human life. I don't think it needs not to be there. But I think the amount of times people resort to anger, I think it's overused.
Hmm. I would agree with that as well. Again, and because it's also I've seen it's like it's on a hairpin trigger, right? It's so easy, especially if you get in that rhythm of like being angry. It's so easy to like just spit it up.
Yep. And you know what it is too? It's like when you think about anger, it's just this, and that's why, like you mentioned about not being into your feelings or empathetic. I mean, you are into your feelings, but anyone else's. Anger is just the loudest scream of selfishness. Like it's only thing you feel.
Yes.
And you want other people like to feel it, feel my anger. You see how fucking mad I am? Like it's this ultimate display of selfishness that like you're pouring on someone that they can't even understand because you're too far into you. You can't even explain why you have the feelings. You only want people to see the eruption or feel the eruption.
Yeah.
Like that's gonna change anyone's point of view.
Yeah. It's wild how toxic it is and how blinding it is to to the toxicity you're actually putting your, like, because you said it's so selfish. You're in yourself about it, so you're like it's like the guy that gets cut off and then will not be content until everybody he's met that day knows that some asshole cut him off.
Yes.
But then that energy that you're putting off in all of those social situations is so fucking toxic. Like I've seen it. Like people don't even want to be around you. They're just doing what they can do to appease whatever you're saying, and then get the fuck away from you if they're not in that mind state.
No, absolutely. I used to do this to my wife. If I was mad at someone and I would tell my wife about it, if she didn't end the sentence with like, yeah, go fuck them too, I would be mad at her. Yeah. I would just start more anger. It's like, you don't support me? The hell is this?
Right.
Now I got this. Like it's a joke. Like and that's what happens. So if you're in a relationship or you're talking to someone and they're like not going into that anger thing with you, like you get more mad at them. But in reality, what they're doing is they're helping you stay more centered. And it's literally like the opposite thing that you're like you're yelling at them for like doing the right thing to you.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is that, because I do believe that that stems from selfishness, and that's something like that's probably been my biggest struggle in my own life is like trying to overcome this self-aggrandizing selfishness so that I could get the fuck out of my own way and be what people need me to be in their lives. And but I think, looking at it, it's like how do you begin to take those blinders off if that's you? Because a big part of my audience actually is military, and I know that they all struggle with it because I've lived in that world for so long. And so if you're talking to somebody that is perpetually angry and it is getting in the way of their own lives, it's like how do you begin to take those layers down? Do you think it's through understanding of yourself? Do you think it's through anger management type things? You know, because I look at those and they're like, oh, stress ball and all this stuff, and it's like, well, yeah, but you're putting a Band-Aid on the problem in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Wow. This is a great question. So let me just make sure I understand this. Are you saying, Rick, am I answering this as I'm someone that's angry and I want to figure this out, or is I know someone that's angry and I want to help them figure it out?
You're someone that's angry and you want to figure this out.
Great. Okay. So a lot of my youth anger and even in my adult life anger really stemmed from me being obsessive about this idea of perfection. And I think a lot of people are really caught up in that. And I hate to break it to everybody because this was one of the most harsh realizations that I had for me. At the end of the day, you're going to be a B plus. You're 80. Everything's going to be a B plus. Nothing is ever going to be an A plus. Not the first iPhone. Not this podcast. Not Angelo. Like, we are going to be a B plus. That is basically the best you could do. And if you are mad or pushing people and pushing yourself to be anything more than that, there's nothing wrong with you using that as a form of motivation. There's something wrong when you are attaching that to your identity. And I was the latter for many years. Is I was upset, and if the people around me weren't perfect, and like I was almost setting me and everyone else up to fail because of this cycle of anger that I've been so used to. And I think if you are living this cycle where you are constantly finding yourself in this anger and in this place, you need to really start looking at is, why am I setting myself up to be that way all the time? I think that's the first thing for people to really just sink their teeth into, is that, you know, being this person, you would have to know that this is not serving your greater good, or you'll never make a change. Like, that's first.
Yeah. Also, too, so just in what you're saying, it sounds like you have to be, regardless of what the situation is, you're probably always mad about the same thing. That's manifesting in different ways.
Absolutely. It's always the same thing.
And so, damn, that could be huge for people, right? Because even now, I'm thinking like, damn, what is the thing that's made me so angry for so long? Actually, I think I know what it is because I've done a lot of this work. But for people thinking about this, I think that they really do need to think through that, right? Because there's something. And until you fix that something, no matter what situation you fix, isn't really going to matter because it's going to keep popping up.
Absolutely. So your anger is and when you're having these keep popping up because you're projecting it on other people.
Yes.
And so that's why it's always the same, because you are in a constant state of projection, because I couldn't get mad at someone if I wasn't projecting part of me on top of them.
It's interesting. You and I, before the show, we were talking about how incredibly dope it is to be a human being. Like, you could have been anything. Like, you could have been a fly, could have been, depending on what your theological slant is and how you feel about the universe. Like, basically, like, you get to be a human right now in the time of the internet. And then it's like, but then at the same time, it's like we have all of this faulty wiring. And so everybody, or maybe it's not faulty wiring, right? Maybe it's actually incredibly advanced wiring that's trying to teach you something. But it's like, how do we, and this could be rhetorical, but it's like, how do we get out of our own way so that we can actually manifest the potential that we have in this life? Because I think almost everybody, because of these projections, because of these emotions, because of these things, they're living as a very small version of who they actually could be.
Yeah, I do. Well, first, I do love being fucking human. And if you don't love being fucking human, just imagine that there's some punk kid with a magnifying glass burning you because you're an ant. How shitty is your life?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I stepped on 8,000 ants in my life, okay?
Yeah, right.
Nobody's stepping on me today.
Right,
all right? We're doing pretty good. I think a lot of this really traces back to your youth, and this, for most people that are going through anger, it's probably a cycle, right? You're repeating some sort of cycle that this is coming through. And for a lot of people that use anger, since we're on the topic, that the root of that is called powerlessness. You use anger because you are seeking control. And what you're doing is, by pumping up your chest and screaming or getting violent or whatever you want to call it, you are using that to manipulate someone or a situation. And that comes from a place of almost like a little kid that nobody's listening to them. So now they're going to do something really loud and bad so people pay attention to them. And the truth is that when we were kids, you probably laugh about that now, but I'm willing to bet many adults, including myself, have done that in real life in a man or woman's body. And so what you really need to take a look at is, what part of your life do you feel powerlessness or not in control? And if that's your work, you may need to look at how you could start saying no to things, or maybe how you could adjust your position. But this anger is coming out of some form of powerlessness. Maybe you and your partner, you're agreeing to things with your partner just so they will like you. That's a form of powerlessness. And then you throw it up at them, the chance you get for them not having your back or backing you up and all that kind of stuff. And so anger is just the same kind of cycle that you probably used when you were a kid, or that started from when you were a kid, that you were powerlessness, because at a point we all really are, because we have to listen to our parents, because at 6 years old, that's all I got. But now at 35, I have a choice. And that's why I choose to really face this idea of anger, because it's on my board in my office. It's my biggest goal of 2019, is how to really get through this. This is my most important thing.
And honestly, to take that thought full circle, it's like, when you're not, because I mean, if I'm being super real, I've not always seen the sanctity in life. Like, there's times where I'm like, fuck this. This seems like bullshit. Like, it's very easy to not feel like life is this incredibly amazing thing. It's typically perspective, and that perspective is powerless. You feel like the ant, right? You feel like the ant that's getting burned for no fucking reason. And that's when you don't understand how good this life can be.
Yeah, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's like, it's almost
Who
always...
knew that ant analogy was going to circle?
Right, that's all I could think of. I'm like, no, because I fucking felt like the ant a bunch of times. And I think it's perspective. I think it's like, that's how you sort of figure this life thing out. Or, the quality of your life is almost always shaped by the perspective of your situation. The perspective that you have on it at the moment is one thing I've begun to realize.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think also, too, we have way more resources than we believe we do.
Yes.
We really do. There's a lot of great, free things out there. It's just incredible to think, like, there wasn't podcast 20 years ago helping you figure this out. Like, if you really wanted to know this stuff, you had to be like in a very woke place in the world.
Right. I agree completely. All right. So the last, I got two other things I want to get to, as far as the role that they kind of play in our lives. And the next one, that is work. Because the reason I want to talk about work is because when I see you, you're somebody that works your ass off. You work super hard in everything that you do. And because of that, you've been successful in those things. Like, you have a very successful gym. I just see you as this really hard worker. But we're in a culture that almost, they glorify work over everything else. And that's not how you do it. Because every time I talk to you, like even today, you're like talking about how much more you're playing in your life and how the quality of your life is increasing because of that. Do you think we always fuck that roll up, that work and play in our lives?
Yeah, this is something that I got caught up in for many years. Is I was more obsessive about how many things I did, not how well I did them. Like, I wanted to just check off a 20 task to-do list more than I wanted to do one thing incredibly well. And I started realizing that in your day, you honestly can't do that many things that well. No. You just really can't. Like, you just really, like, the amount of time and energy it really takes to do something well, and to think about just what kind of work and what kind of decision making you want to do is, for me, is super important to realize that I want to make great decisions. I want my head to be in the right place to handle anything that comes my way. And you can't do that working all the time.
Right. No, because you're consumed by something.
Right. And so for me, I just kind of flipped the thinking of, is I just want to kick ass. I don't want to kick a lot of asses, like sort of like the young bull and the old bull. I'm just like, when I was younger, do you know the story?
Ish. Yeah, I get the point.
Okay. So I'll tell the story. It's probably one of my favorite stories ever. And I pass it along as much as I can.
Perfect.
There's a young bull and an old bull on top of a hill. The young bull looks down and sees a herd of cows and just goes ballistic, super excited, running around, runs up to the old bull and says, "Hey, hey, hey, why don't we run down there and fuck a cow?" And the old bull looks at him and says, "Why don't we walk and fuck them all?" And so just take your time and just do what you have in front of you fucking perfect today. And don't worry about doing more because that's what you want to tell your friends, or that's what some jerk off on Instagram wants you to do more today, or anything like that. Like, do your shit perfectly. Like right now, I'm doing this podcast perfectly. I'm not worried about anything. This is my time to be the best. And then when I have a break later today, I'm not going to guilt myself into feeling like I need to do more. I'm going to go do other things that really matter to me that have to do with myself or in my relationships, right? Because there's those two other areas of my life. And so, instead of me having to go and do more or read another book or anything, I'm going to have an hour lunch break with my wife. And then I'm going to go, like I said, I've been playing like jujitsu and basketball. I just got my bike put together. It's like I've been doing more things like that. And then what I find that happens to me is when I get back to the work, when I'm getting into these situations that I have to make clear decisions and understand things, my mind is ready to take on that workload because I'm not running around all day at a 7. I'm running around at like a 3 or 4. So when it has to get up to a 7, I'm ready for it. I am not living at those RPMs.
Mm. Yeah, I think when you work, there's so many inherent problems that stem from when you worship at the altar of more. Like if never enough is the narrative, like the actual direction that you understand is it's never good enough, and so you always, it's like, it's the hedonic treadmill. You're always just in this cycle of needing more, and it's never ever going to be good enough, and there's never actually going to be enough.
Yep, it's like a strainer.
What do you mean?
Like, like when you're cooking, it's like trying to fill up a bowl that's a strainer. You'll never get to fill it up. It's just going to fall right through. And I did that for years. There was never enough. There was never enough money. There wasn't enough anything. It was a very big driver of my life, and I didn't realize it. But that was the thing that drove me crazy. Like we talked about my sleep quality before. I didn't sleep for shit for my late 20s into my early 30s because I just thought I felt like I was under attack, like I had to do more, like for some crazy reason.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the problems with being driven is if you don't keep it in check, ambition becomes in the driver's seat, which is not the proper role of ambition. Like ambition just for the sake of it doesn't get you anywhere except for burnt out. And so you got to put, I think, ambition in the right role in your life in a lot of ways.
That's a good way to put ambition. That's articulated like that. I don't think I've ever thought of it that way, but yeah, that's 100%.
Dope. It's in my new book.
Beautiful.
All right, cool. The last thing that I wanted to touch on a little bit is breath work, because in your class we really opened up with a lot of breath work, and I actually found it to be interesting because breath work is, well, everybody talks about it these days.
Yep.
And we would do this breathing pattern essentially where the exhale was double the length of the inhale, and afterward I would look around and I would just the room almost feels different than it did before I closed my eyes and started breathing. And so I know it plays a big role in your life, but what is the role that breath plays in your life besides sustaining it, I suppose?
Yeah. I think the human body is the most highest level of intelligence. Nature is too, but for that matter, but that we have access to, this human body. It blows my mind. If I cut my finger right now, my body's figuring out how to grow new skin. I don't even need to tell it. It doesn't I don't even need to put a Band-Aid on it. It's like that genius. And we get this one thing that we all have in common. It's breathing. We all do it. And yet many people do it, but they don't practice doing it. And I mean, how many people think that they're going to be good parents without practicing to be a good parent? Just because it's natural, just because we have access to it, doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn it and try to appreciate how to be good at it. And so I look at the breath work, the breathing as breathing is the transmission of your body. And I say this in the course, and I say this all the time. I have never made a decision I regretted when I was breathing calmly.
Damn. That's something to think about for sure.
Why would you not want to get control of this? Think about everything in life that you have fucking embarrassed yourself. You've said the wrong thing you've done. You have never done it at 54 beats a minute.
No.
And so for me, it became this practice of like shutting out the world so I could learn about this thing that's going on with me all the time. And so for me, I use it as a way to, like I say, like my transmission, just to keep me in a comfortable breathing place, because I don't want to be this volatile person. Like, you don't want to make decisions based on that. I love being emotional, but I'm not saying that I want to be at a place where I don't have control of it either. And I think the breath helps you learn how to control this thing that when you need it the most, you're going to be really glad that you learned how to control it.
100%. And so, you know what I think is great is like talking to you about this stuff is one thing I've realized about like high performers in our lives is one of the things that they do is they elevate the mundane in a bunch of different ways. So shit that we all do every day, they take for granted. They almost add like an element of stardom to regular normal shit that we all do every day. And I think with breathing, that's like one of the things that you're doing. It's like, yeah, everybody breathes. You don't have to think about it. It's just going to happen. Autonomic nervous system. But you can elevate that to really increase the quality of your life. And I think, I think throughout life, like the more of the mundane you can elevate, actually, the better off your life is going to be.
I mean, just think about this there. Like, everyone could eat and digest food, but if you ate and you ate really good food, that's a plus. If your body's physical, it's very mundane that it could move and walk. But if you did it in extra, more challenging ways, or you pushed it to its limits, you would argue that you're more healthy physically. If you do this breath work, you're more healthy, you could say aerobically or cardio, you know what I mean? Cardiology or whatever. Why? So, I mean, it all really does play a point where, like, all we're doing is taking these things that we all could do, but like you said, you're just kicking them at a more in tune level than if you didn't use them.
Right. Exactly. Man, well, this has been super informative 40 minutes. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't get to today or leave the audience with? A lot of times I'll end with the Lionheart kicker, which is based on advice, but I've had you on the show so many times, I feel like not necessary.
It's the only thing that I think I want to say is having fears is what makes you human. And you have to appreciate that just as much as you appreciate all the other things about being human. And I think the more people that we could just get a handle on this fear that we all have, that we all carry to some degree, and the worst part about it all is it never ends. You just find it in a different form. We're going to be better off, because I think if we're all just like, listen, dude, I'm scared of shit, you're scared of shit, that just gives us a better level of understanding of everyone. And that's the thing that I hope people get.
I love that, man. Yeah, I agree. I think fear, laughter, crying, joy, pain, they're all just as much a part of our lives as the other. And we obviously want to place emphasis on the ones that make us feel good inherently. But the reality is that if you skip the other parts, like, you're stuck where you're at. You'll never actually get to where you're supposed to be in this life, I think.
Well, also, too, when you come out of something shitty and that first feeling of joy, that's like the best feeling of joy. So you need those you need those anyways.
You need the contrast, 100%. Do you, for people that are listening to this, they want to follow along with you, support you, where's the best way for them to do that these days?
Beautiful. Yeah. So my podcast is on iTunes and Spotify. I believe it's on Google Play as well. Please forgive me for not knowing all those details. We're on Instagram at the Alpha Hippie and at Angelo Sisco. I really don't post that much stuff about me. It's more about just some of my feelings or little personal stuff. But at the Alpha Hippie, I'm posting content and stuff there. And then the alphahippiepodcast.com for anything to do with the podcast and masculine mastery.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. Well, thanks for taking the time again to join me. I think as always, you deliver.
No, my pleasure, man. Thank you for being a part of the course and having me on the show.
Yeah, hell yeah. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for listening to Lionheart Radio. I hope that the information from today's show will make you fitter, happier, and healthier. For the show notes of this episode and every episode, head to www.lionheartrad.io. Yep, just like Lionheart Radio. And please, if you have the time, head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps us to know that we're on the right track and delivering you reliable information and value. As always, feedback is welcomed. If you have any comments on the show or like to suggest a guest, send me an email at rick@luavive.com. That's LUAVIVE.com. Thanks for your support, and we will see you next time.
Bitch, I feel good. Don't I look stupendous? My shine is so endless, and shit you can do to end this. Even when I'm dead, niggas still gon' bump that chip shit. Coke, white, Escalade on cinches for you dipshits. So you won't forget this. Midwest nigga be the coldest. Cleveland is the